RJ Harvey now back-to-back weeks of 20-plus PPR points. RJ Harvey with more RB1 finishes than any other rookie running back this season and leads all rookies in touchdowns. We want to hear a little RJ Harvey praise and capitulation here.
No. I mean, there's a little bit of an emotional bias here where, like, now I feel like I've been wrong on him twice. Up until this week, he had one game over 46 rushing yards, and he had like 6 games under 10 rushing yards. He's okay. He's probably not as good of a play this week as you think, but he's probably a better play than I want to argue. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
The fantasy football regular season is over and the fantasy playoffs are here. It's week 15 here on the School of Scott Fantasy Football Podcast. Theo Gremminger and Scott Barrett every single week on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network and Fantasy Points YouTube. Scott, we got to talk about it. Daniel Jones done for the season. A crushing blow to fantasy managers, specifically Superflex fantasy managers who are now scrambling to try to figure out what they're doing at the quarterback spot. And for a number of managers rostering players like Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren, a very, very tilting loss. This team is definitely headed south. Dropped to 8-5. 3 games in a row they've lost. An absolute mess. What can you expect from the Indianapolis Colts offense here in Week 15?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really bad. You know, I'm an avowed Shane Steichen truther, and that have to feel pretty good about that this year, right? Daniel Jones left off as dead and really productive. This offense was incredible, but it's just so bad now, so they don't have their QB2, Anthony Richardson. QB3, Riley Leonard, picked up a knee injury. He's day to day. They have Brett Rippin, and then they just signed Phillip Rivers, who's 44 years old, hasn't played football since 2020. And so it's just really, really bad. And so I don't think you could start Alec Pierce. I think Tyler Warren is now a low end tight end 1. I said Pittman might be the only, like, the least negatively impacted, just because we really saw Leonard hyper focus on him. He had like a 33% target share on Leonard's dropbacks, but he gets downgraded too. And Jonathan Taylor, I think this is really bad. Like, I know they're just going to try and give him the ball as much as possible and take it out of one of these quarterbacks' hands. But this is bad. This is crazy stat. Jonathan Taylor this year is averaging 31.5 fantasy points per game in wins. In losses, he's averaging just 11.7. Really game script sensitive. And we should be expecting some losses. They're 11.5 point underdogs against the Seahawks this week. 12.5 against Seattle this week. And then heavy underdogs against the 49ers and Jaguars. And we did see that with Taylor last year as well. Like, don't forget those Anthony Richardson games were really, really rough. He was, top 5 in fantasy points per game with Flacco, but what was it? Mid-range RB2 with Anthony Richardson. So yeah, this is really bad. Unless Phillip Rivers, I don't know, just somehow a literal grandfather, balls out, because at least apparently he has an understanding of this offense.
Yeah, it's a wild thing. Phillip Rivers is a high school coach, and his team runs the exact same offense as the Indianapolis Colts. So he speaks to Shane Steichen weekly about plays, and they even talk about film. So there's a familiarity there between Rivers and Steichen, and the scheme should be very familiar. But again, Phillip Rivers was the coach of a high school team. So shout out to Gunnar Rivers, his son, for keeping him so locked in with this one. I don't know. The whole thing's a mess. Jonathan Taylor, he's been trending down recently. Like, if we take away the game that was in Europe where he went absolutely nuts against the Atlanta Falcons. That was the 49-point game. And again, that game counts, so we can't really completely take it out. But if we go back to week 9, 7.7 points against Pittsburgh, 8.6 points against the Kansas City Chiefs, scored 15 against Houston, and then 11 this past week against Jacksonville. And Scott, what's interesting is if it's Riley Leonard, it sort of makes the receiving production just go to 0 for Taylor. It doesn't seem like a check down type quarterback. Like you said, he fixated on Michael Pittman Jr., sort of the tunnel vision. And Taylor had at least 2 receptions in every single game this year. Significant leap forward in receiving work for him this year. 0 catches in week 14. So Taylor's a little bit of a mess. I think you have to start him because, like you and Ryan talked about in the Everything Report, I think he's going to get a ton of volume. Like, no matter who's behind center, I think Taylor's going to get 25 carries in this one, just for better or for worse. And I think, regardless of game flow with Seattle, they're still going to attempt to get the ball in Jonathan Taylor's hands. So I think that's a crutch for you. But he goes from being like a top 3, top 4 running back to maybe a running back 10 to 12 range. Do you think that's about appropriate?
I think RB7 is where he checked in for me this week. I mean, he can
so
still rip off these long runs, like he's such a freak of nature, and there's a real chance he can get 30 plus touches. And, but yeah, this is no doubt worse than, he was a lock and load, easy top 3 running back before that.
And then you're looking to break ties with, if it's Rivers, are you going to use Michael Pittman? Are you recommending him as sort of a wide receiver 3 range player?
No, I think regardless, it's like wide receiver 4 range.
Another player that's significantly trending down recently is Emeka Egbuka. You talked about this in the Everything Report. You think Baker Mayfield's a little bit banged up here. The inaccuracy has been really problematic for a lot of this Bucs offense. Yeah,
so I said this was Emeka Egbuka, the biggest positive regression candidate I can remember. And, how I'm defining that is by fantasy points over expectation. So it's actual fantasy points scored versus expected fantasy points based on volume. So first 5 weeks of the season, he was a major negative regression candidate. He was the wide receiver 3 by fantasy points per game, but ranked much lower by XFP per game. I think it was mid-range wide receiver 3 levels. And then he got hurt. Then he came back week 7. And week 7 till now, he's fallen short of his volume-based expectation by 9.1 fantasy points per game. That's easily most in fantasy points data history. 78% worse than the next closest season, which was a Garrett Wilson, Zach Wilson season. And so, yeah, this is really bad. But, tends to regress the mean. What is going on here? I think my friend Jeff Mueller, injury expert, he DM'd me around week 7, week 8. He was like, hey, I told him to, tip me off if he ever had any just off the wall injury takes. He was like, I think Baker Mayfield picked up an injury. What was it? The 49ers game or the game before that. And I think he's dealing through something. He was on the injury report. He's practicing full, but he didn't look great the week after that as well. And so I just kind of filed that. And so since week 7, Baker Mayfield ranks dead last in completion percentage over expectation, dead last in catchable throw rate, worse than JJ McCarthy, worst in just about every stat you want to look at. For these numbers, I'm excluding throws behind the line of scrimmage where I don't think accuracy really shows up. And over the same span, Emeka Egbuka ranks dead last in catchable target rate, just 50%. So only 50% of his targets are catchable, easily worst. He ranks 3rd in targets, but 28th in catchable targets. He ranks 6th in air yards, but 35th in catchable air yards. And so what he's getting is really just a bunch of junk volume. So you look at the box score, you see these 12 targets, you got to cut that in half. Only 6 of those are catchable. And I really do think it's on Baker here. He's separating at a high level. It's really just, not too many drops. It's really just that the volume he's saying they're just not catchable targets. There's also been like a good bit of bad luck. And so I kind of concluded with, this is going to regress the mean. This is, -9.1 fantasy points over expect. Like there's no way that it sticks, but it's also like, we should be valuing him more in line with his catchable XFP than his actual XFP. And if you do that, he's really more of a high-end wide receiver 3. And then that's assuming Mike Evans doesn't play, but Mike Evans, might be back sooner than we were anticipating.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs should come back, so maybe that helps the entire offense a little bit.
To me, it's really just the Baker injury.
No, go for it.
I think he's playing quarterback at the worst level, at least bottom 3 level, accuracy dead last right now. And this is just kind of who he is and who he's been. Like he's a warrior and he gets credit for being a warrior. But sometimes it's in spite of his own good, and like we saw this as last year, Cleveland, he played through a bunch of injuries that would have sidelined, just about anyone else. He played through it. He played awful. And then it cost him a lot of money in free agency. And I think he's doing the same thing. Jeff Mueller, I think, was speculating week 7. It was like an oblique. And then he picked up this shoulder injury to the opposite side. It's not his throwing arm, but it still impacts how he's throwing the ball. That was the same injury he had as last year in Cleveland. And so, Tristan Wirfs coming back. Yeah, but you still have a quarterback who I don't think is healthy, and I don't think should be out there, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely a tilting one for Emeka Egbuka fantasy managers. Egbuka has scored 10 points or fewer in 7 of his last 8 games. Not what you want to see for fantasy managers heading into the playoffs. If you're looking for a last-minute gift, not really last minute at this point, if you're looking for a gift for someone for Christmas or for Hanukkah, or if you're looking for an edge in the fantasy football playoffs, look no further than fantasypoints.com. You're going to get access to all of our award-winning tools and rankings. You're going to get access to Fantasy Points data, and you're going to get access to Scott's Everything Report, which is really the article that we focus on here on the School of Scott podcast. So many great things over at fantasypoints.com. Check it out. And you can use the code Theo and get an additional 15% off our already reduced prices. What better gift than winning fantasy football, winning DFS, winning gambling, winning dynasty advice? We've got you covered on everything over at Fantasy Points. Scott, 2 weeks ago, we checked in on our FFPC teams, and we're still running pure. We're still winning some money here. Shout out to Rich Rebar, who was my guest last week on Dynasty Life. Our team lost a heartbreaker in the Big Gorilla, the $350 entry. We lost by 2 points there, so we finished in second place. That team was the number 3 seed in the regular season, so we don't advance to the 3-week sprint, but we do cash some money there. Really a disappointing one, the way that ended, but I'm sure we're going to split another team with Rich, and again, we did finish in the money with that one. We had another team that won third place. There was the 2 of us. We won third place. Really kind of a disappointing one there that team doesn't advance to the sprint. But we still have 2 FFPC main event teams that are rocking and rolling heading into it. One team was the 2 of us drafted, and we won the third place game. We'd already qualified for the sprint. We'd already won money from the regular season. We finished second overall in the regular season, so we won some money there. We lost in week 13, so we played a third place game in week 14. We scored 150 plus, and we were able to do so with our backfield of Bam Knight and Devin Neal. So really, really scraping the bottom of the barrel there. And despite Jalen Hurts having the worst game he's ever had, with 4 turnovers, including 2 turnovers on the same play, that team had Jaylen Waddle go off for 18, Puka Nacua 35.7, Christian Watson with 24.9, and we started the Miami Dolphins defense. They gave us 17, and Isaiah Likely scored 14.5. So that team's looking pretty good. That team gets back Omarion Hampton, And that team has Luther Burden, who's trending up. Your thoughts on this roster, Scott? And Drake London, never say never, could be back at some point.
Yeah, is this the team that ranks 20th overall?
No. This is the other team. We're gonna go through. We're building up to that one.
Yeah, I don't know. This one feels kind of thin.
Feels a little thin. We've got some decisions to make this week. So tight end wise, it's going to be Theo Johnson, Colby Parkinson, or Isaiah Likely. It's probably going to be Isaiah Likely against that Cincinnati Bengals defense.
That looks nice.
That looks really nice. And then we've got some decisions at wide receiver here because do we put in Luther Burden ahead of Devonta Smith coming off a sort of a really ugly one there, or do we just roll with Devonta Smith against the Vegas Raiders? That's one I think we're going to have to go through, maybe the two of us a little later this week. Omarion Hampton, though, we get him back finally. We didn't start him because of the lack of clarity heading into Monday, but with Devin Neal sort of playing the way he's playing and Omarion Hampton, at least we have a little bit of juice at the running back spot.
Yeah. I was thinking about Luther Burden. I feel like it depends on if Rome Odunze is out again. But his usage really didn't improve too much. I don't know, man. I had such hopes and dreams of him having like an Amon-Ra St. Brown end of his rookie year to close out, and Rome Odunze goes down. I'm getting really excited. But yeah, I don't know. He's just not featured to the extent that I think he should be, just based on the efficiency and production relative to everyone else. Another analyst was saying he's more like DJ Moore. He's the eventual DJ Moore replacement. And maybe that's right. But I mean, to me, he looks like he's better than DJ Moore.
Yeah, I feel like Burden's one where I think this is a hard conversation to have a little bit later in the week, but at least Burden's got a little bit of juice there. We're going to talk about A.J. Brown a little bit later, but everything's sort of trending towards A.J. Brown right now in the Philadelphia Eagles passing game. Devonta Smith certainly taking a big step back. So that team, we're going to have to really, really thread the needle in order to win. And a reminder on that team, that was a Tucker Kraft team. So we lost Kraft. That really, really hurt us. We lost Scadaboo off of that team. So that team could have been a lot better. We do have the team that's 20th overall, so we've run really, really pure with this one. That team finished number 1 overall in the regular season. We won easily in week 13, and then we won with about 150 points scored this past week. 149 to 136 was our final score, so comfortable enough finish here. Devon Achane looks to have avoided anything serious. It's a rib injury there. We also started Devin Neal on that one. Jacoby Brissett we've been using at the quarterback spot. And then we have a lot of juice and firepower at the wide receiver position. We were able to overcome Justin Jefferson with his 3-point score. Jackson Smith-Njigba delivers another huge one, about 30 points for him, 28.1 PPR points. We also were able to survive Rashee Rice, a really low-scoring game in that one. This team has a ton of players and a number of lineup decisions. We actually went with Brenton Strange over Jake Ferguson this past week. That didn't work out. But shout out to Abib Agbatoba. This team has been running pure all season long. We feel like we've got a chance with this one. It's going to take Justin Jefferson being a little more Justin Jefferson-like if we're really going to make a threat to finish in the real money.
Yeah, I really hope so. But that's part of it is that's a unique asset to have. You can't imagine there's many Justin Jefferson teams we have to worry about. Certainly not any Justin Jefferson teams in the top 20. And so if he just, becomes the guy, and I don't think that's impossible. I really think all it might take is to him just go full diva. I need 10 catches every single week to close out the season. That could be a power law advantage for a team that right now is top 20 overall in scoring. So that's a big advantage over the rest of the field. And we're positioned right now to win I don't know, it's good money. What is it, 10K or better payouts, all inside the top 25?
Yeah, we're chasing that $1,000,000. You want to finish in first place. You want to get the $1,000,000. That's the goal there. Yeah, Jefferson definitely gives you a little bit of variance versus the field. You're definitely like more unique having him, especially where you've got him on a Rashee Rice, Jackson Smith, and Jigba team. So we're already wide receiver dominant. Jake Ferguson, I think, goes back into the lineup. And again, I referenced Devin Neal. Abib and I sort of picked him up in a bunch of spots. Devin Neal, like, the usage is strong. So this offense, we'll talk about Tyler Shough in a little bit. I feel like Devin Neal getting you this 15 points per game, as long as Etienne plays, I think that's something we can sort of play with in our RB2 spot. And again, quarterback-wise, Jacoby Brissett, we've gotten a ton out of him. Looks like Jaden Daniels, who knows what's going on there. I know Dan Quinn said he expects to have Jaden Daniels back, but at some point, you would think Washington would want to shut him down for the year. Re-aggravates the same elbow injury.
So stupid. If they play him this week, that's so dumb.
It's beyond dumb. It feels really like, what's the point of doing this? So again, this team's sort of running pure. So a very strong season for us. I also wanted to flex this one. I won another main event league, and I had to use a backfield of Kareem Hunt and Samaje Perine this week, and I still won the game. I get Travion Henderson back this week, so that team runs pure. That team's got a ton of juice at wide receiver, a ton of juice at tight end, also a Jackson Smith and Jigba team, and it's a JSN Jamar Chase team, so that team could potentially have a little bit of firepower, and that's Drake Maye. So I believe I used Tua Tagovailoa this week because I have Jackson Dart and Drake Maye both with that same bye week. So that team also gets through. And then I ran pure in the NFFC Silver Bullet. That was one where I talked to you and Abib last night. I needed like a lot of points out of Cameron Dicker and AJ Brown, and I end up getting it like +7. So my single entry in the NFFC Silver Bullet is there. And then I had a couple of NFFC prime times and an NFFC Super that I split with Nelson Sousa that got through, a prime time with Dan Williamson. So we've got a sweat here. We got a 3-week sweat here. Not a whole lot to do other than make very strong lineup decisions and hope your guys don't get hurt because no more waiver wire there. So we'll keep checking in on this teams. Shout out to the audience at School of Scott who watched our draft streams. Really, really fun. I'm sure we'll end up drafting more teams next year because we're going to end up with a lot of credit, Scott.
Let's do it.
100%. Let's talk about, like, Scott, you talked about the Justin Jefferson with our main event team. There's also going to be fewer A.J. Brown teams because of his slow start to the year. There's going to be even fewer Saquon Barkley teams. Both of those players, though, look to be trending up. The schedule looks to be very, very strong for Philadelphia. A.J. Brown specifically over the last 3 weeks. Earlier this year on School of Scott, you talked about A.J. Brown as sort of a buy low candidate for redraft managers. You were spot on with that one. Over the last 3 weeks, 25.7 points per game. He's had double-digit targets now in 4 straight weeks and now goes up against 2 bottom 10 defenses in the Vegas Raiders and the Washington Commanders before a potential high-scoring Week 17 game against Buffalo. Your thoughts on AJ before we get to Saquon?
Yeah, it really does seem like, they've turned, or clearly the production's there. Double-digit targets in 4 straight games. He did that just once over his first 8. He's hit 100 yards in 3 straight after topping 80 just twice to start the year. And so over the last 3 weeks, ranks first in yards per game, first in fantasy points per game, second in targets per game. And so how did you fix it? And the fix turned out to be pretty simple. He has a much higher first read target share. Over the last 4 weeks, he's easily first. Before that, he was 18th behind Devonta Smith. He's also jacked up his horizontal route rate, his intermediate route rate. Those are the money routes from a fantasy perspective. So he's running fewer go routes, which really just designed to help everyone else open them up. And, is getting the money routes. And then, of course, a big maybe the biggest boost is Philadelphia has just been a lot more pass heavy. They were one of the most run heavy offenses in football. But over the last 3 weeks, they're 38 pass attempts per game, up from 27. That's a dramatic increase. And so just, I feel comfortable trusting AJ Brown as a mid-range wide receiver 1. I do worry about the matchup this week against the Raiders. Like, the Eagles, I don't think they need to throw more than once the entire game in this matchup. But, I think just the volume's been so good. I think he's still a mid-range wide receiver 1 for me this week. Or low end this week, mid-range probably the week after.
Now, Saquon Barkley gets a big performance last night against the LA Chargers, and now has a chance to sort of change the narrative arc, I think, heading into the 2026 redraft season. We mentioned the two opponents. You mentioned sort of your apprehension about A.J. Brown. Certainly won't have any apprehension when it comes to Vegas against opposing running backs. Then you've got Washington again, and then Scott, it's all setting up for Saquon Barkley in Week 17. The Buffalo Bills have been getting shredded versus opposing running backs this season. So you get that Week 17 matchup. Saquon, this could be a really interesting one. And talk about a player that there won't be too many Saquon Barkley teams in like Best Ball Mania, FFPC main events, NFFC prime times. He could be an edge player against the field.
Yeah, I don't know that he's turned a corner or anything. He's had 2 good games all year for a player who has, 18 plus carries in 8 games this year. But he does have an amazing matchup this week, and yeah, so he's a low end RB1 this week, but I don't know, the larger sample, not really a player I'm super excited about down the stretch outside of his uniqueness, I guess. If we're talking FFPC leagues.
Yeah, I don't know. I think with Barkley, I feel maybe a little bit more optimistic than you do about him these next few weeks. I would rise him up a little bit. Philly's in must-win territory. I think they're going to really have to get a lot out of out of Barkley, especially in these next 2 matchups. I don't think they're going to mess around. And I think a lot with Barkley, where he gets drafted in 2026 is going to be decided in these next few weeks. And we've seen this in some of these huge volume seasons, huge production seasons historically, where the guys sort of trend downwards the following year and then have big bounce backs the season after. We saw it with guys like Arian Foster, where they come off of a huge season, then they regress a little bit, and then they have that huge bounce back. I think maybe that could be the arc with Saquon, that maybe he was overdrafted this year and then next year becomes a value. So I'm looking for him to sort of turn things up a notch in the playoffs. I have a ton of Saquon Barkley dynasty teams where I'm really excited about using him, and I think we do see it this week, and it gets 2 good games in a row with sort of big back-to-back performances. A.J. Brown, I don't know, Scott. I don't know if they'll get away from it. I think he's going to be so hyper-targeted in this offense that even in a game against Vegas, you might just get your scoring out of him in like the first 3 quarters. I think he's definitely going to put up a 15 plus. Washington, he's always had good success with. So I'm completely into those 2 Eagles. Very, very tilting loss last night. I think they're going to come out really looking to destroy the Raiders. I think this is going to be a statement game for them down the stretch. Let's talk about another situation where you have one of the best offenses in the NFL in the LA Rams. And not only do we have Kyren Williams, but we have Blake Corum now with strong games back-to-back. Is Blake Corum better than Kyren Williams? And can we use both of these players in the fantasy football playoffs?
Yeah, well, you know me, I'm such a volume whore. I really don't want to believe in Corum, but he's just been so good. This is Brett Whitefield's boy. He was so high on Corum coming out of the draft, and we also, at least I did, sort of gave up on him after he didn't do anything at all his rookie season. But I'm gonna. It's a tough one. I'm gonna say probably not, unless you're desperate for a flex play. But you can't deny he's looked really good these last few weeks.
And how about Blake Corum versus Kyren Williams? Is this a storyline that you think maybe carries itself into the offseason? Is there a chance? I know that they paid Kyren Williams, but with the way that Blake Corum's looking, to me, he just looks so explosive. Is there a chance we could see at some point this backfield be a Blake Corum takeover?
Probably not this year. I think Kyron's played well. You look at what he's done over his last 6 games. He's had a touchdown and 70 plus rushing yards in all but one, despite having really like just 12 to 13 carries in every single one of those games. It's annoying that this is a committee, but I mean, it's working. So I don't really see them going away from it.
I'll give you a big start-sit decision. I have a $1,250 entry league, a Dynasty league in FFPC. I've won this one 2 years in a row, so this is a nice big payout. This year, I didn't get a bye, so I got to win this week to move on. This team has a ton of firepower at running back. It's like Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Saquon Barkley, and I have a flex spot though, where I have to use somebody sort of not necessarily a slam dunk flex. I have Blake Corum, I have Chris Rodriguez, and then I have some other options like Jordan Addison, Bam Knight. So basically it probably comes down for you between Chris Rodriguez and Blake Corum. Which way would you go with that one?
Knowing I would probably chase the volume with Chris Rodriguez. I know the Rams have a tough matchup against the Lions. Who did the Commanders? Oh, the Giants. Yeah.
The Giants.
So I'd play C-Rod probably.
Yeah, so that's one. So let me know in the chat if you disagree with Scott. Addison, Chris Rodriguez, or Blake Corum. And then just another option out there, I have Quentin Johnston as an option as well. So need to thread the needle in this league. Let me know who you would start. We've also seen an uptick in production recently from Travis Etienne and the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've seen Trevor Lawrence finish as a QB1 now 4 weeks in a row. And this offense, though, has been carried by Travis Etienne. And Etienne's usage was just terrific this past week after Bashal Tutin's fumble. How confident are you in Etienne? Is he like sort of an under-the-radar potential league winner in the fantasy playoffs?
I don't know about league winner, but definitely a valuable asset. He's not getting a lot of target volume, is extremely game script sensitive. I have to look at his playoff schedule, but I know he gets the Jets this week. That's a great matchup for him. He looks, really fantastic, and he feels like a lock for 16 plus touches and any victory. You're seeing Bashal Tutin not really involved at all, and yeah, this Jaguars offense looks incredible. And I know I'm a bit of a Trevor Lawrence hater, but he's looked great these last 2 weeks. You had Mina Kimes put out a tweet. Am I crazy, or was that the best game of Trevor Lawrence's career? And so a bunch of people, tag me underneath it. And it's like, on one hand, like, how low is this bar if it's his 75th start and he had 228 passing yards and this was the best game of his career? But also, like, yeah, he looked great. He really looked incredible. And the week before that, he had basically a perfect passer rating in the first half, which he'd never done before. So this is 2 weeks in a row where he's looked great. Liam Cohen, looks like, one of the next, Kyle Shanahan's, Sean McVay's. He's been killing it. And so you have this offense steamrolling. You have, good game script throughout. You have Bashal Tutin less and less involved. Things are looking good for Etienne, who this week I have ranked as a fringe RB1, basically, RB11 or RB13, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'm very, very bullish on Etienne. And I think if you look at Jacksonville, what's been the difference in the last 4 weeks? Jakobi Meyers. The acquisition of Jakobi Meyers was so underrated. We were very excited about seeing Jakobi Meyers in Jacksonville when we did our trade talk with Brett Whitefield, and then we did it again on School of Scott. They acquire Meyers at the deadline, and they've been speaking about him glowingly organizationally. You're starting to see the production for Meyers trend up, but I think stylistically what he's been able to do for this entire offense, it's like a correlation's right there. Meyers shows up, Lawrence plays better. I think this will continue for the rest of the season. And when you look at the Jaguars' schedule, they play the Jets this week in Jacksonville. Spoiler alert, that's going to be a Jaguars win. Then a difficult matchup on the road in Denver, a sort of maybe a little bit of a future playoff sneak preview. Then you have the Colts in week 17. We just saw Travis Etienne have a really strong game against them. So everything is sort of trending up for Travis Etienne to have a really strong rest of the season. I think Trevor Lawrence trending up big time, especially in superflex formats, but he's on that streaming radar, especially this week in single QB formats. If you are in a really bad shape at the quarterback position and you're looking for an edge, 4 straight QB1 performances from Trevor Lawrence. Even Scott is complimenting him. Are you willing to capitulate on RJ Harvey at this point, Scott? RJ Harvey now back-to-back weeks of 20-plus PPR points. RJ Harvey with more RB1 finishes than any other rookie running back this season and leads all rookies in touchdowns. I was talking to Brett Whitefield before the show. We want to hear a little RJ Harvey praise and capitulation here.
No. I mean, there's a little bit of an emotional bias here where like, now I feel like I've been wrong on him twice, right? Where I was like, guys, RJ Harvey is going to smash this year. There's no way J.K. Dobbins stays healthy. He's better than J.K. Dobbins. The role is really nice. This is an elite offensive line with really good game script. And he just sucked, dude. It was up until this week, he had one game over 46 rushing yards, and he had like 6 games under 10 rushing yards. And he just kind of, 2 weeks ago, he fell into the end zone twice. He did that against Dallas a month before that. But then, he had a good game this week. I will say that it was his only good game of the year, really. He had 17 carries, 75 yards, a touchdown, 6 targets, 6 catches, 25 yards. This is what I was, hoping for. I was kind of hoping this would be like every week. I will say the volume, was elite last week. It was elite the week before that. It was a player Brett and I, think is really talented. It was very confusing. He really struggled so much. And part of that, by the way, is, he wasn't getting consistent volume. And so, maybe it's hard to get into the flow of the game and whatnot for a rookie. And now he's getting it. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a confusion, I would say, just because, a roller coaster ride he's taken me on. But yeah, at the very least, the volume's great. The offensive line's great. Game script's great. Getting a bunch of red zone work. So it was the best possible matchup against the Raiders. Now it's the Packers this week. Not so bad. He's okay. He's probably not as good of a play this week as you think, but he's probably a better play than I want to argue.
Yes, so a difficult matchup this week against Green Bay. If he puts up another 20-pointer against the Green Bay Packers defense, we're going to have this exact same question. We're going to keep asking it until Scott says something really nice about RJ Harvey. Let's see how pure he can run. Again, the schedule is not beneficial to him. Jaguars in week 16, and then Kansas City in week 17. In order for him to keep producing, I think you're going to have to see him do it as a receiver, and maybe he'll run pure with the touchdowns as he sort of has this season. Let's keep this conversation going. One more, you know what? Actually, let's pivot over to the quarterback spot, because we prefaced it when we started the show with the loss of Daniel Jones. Let's talk about a couple of potential pivots for fantasy managers looking to pivot off of Daniel Jones and pick up a replacement. And I'm going to ask you about 2 rookies that had huge performances in week 14. Let's first start out with Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders finishes as the QB2 on the week. A ton of passing volume. And with anything Shedeur Sanders, this is a player that there's a hive one way or another. There's a ton of haters and there's a ton of people who back him who love seeing this sort of performance and say, look, I told you so. My first takeaway with this is, how on earth could Kevin Stefanski have gone with Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders at any point this season? I don't care who they were playing. Dillon Gabriel is incapable of this sort of a performance. So Sanders looked great.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a 1 week blip on the radar, or do you think this is going to be Sanders potentially having a strong rest of season?
Yeah, there's no emotional bias here. I have no opinion. I don't care. I didn't have a pre-draft take. I think what you said is wrong. I think he's been better than Dillon Gabriel, sure, but he's been significantly better. I think he's gotten luckier more than anything. You look at the numbers, it's not impressive at all. He ranks dead last in completion percentage over expectation, dead last in catchable throw rate. He's worse than JJ McCarthy, worse than Dillon Gabriel. And you're like, oh yeah, but look at what he just did. He scored 34.5 fantasy points. That was the third most by a Browns quarterback since 1965. It was a best possible matchup. Where blown coverage left and right from the Titans, a bunch of missed tackles, and that was the big thing. The missed tackles, leads the league in percentage of passing yards coming after the catch. You look at what he did on Sunday. 364 passing yards. He did it with a negative 5.8% completion percentage over expectation, the lowest mark of any quarterback in a 300-yard passing game this year. He did it with a 74% yak percentage, the second highest in any 300-yard passing game. It was just, these little dump offs to Harold Fannin that, he's going to get credit for, but that undeservingly. So I dug into this and I did it with an open mind. I don't care one way or the other. And to me, this isn't real. This isn't sustainable. And the bigger takeaway was the Titans get Brock Purdy, and then they get Patrick Mahomes, and then they get Tyler Shough, and all those quarterbacks are going to go crazy against them.
Well, let's stay with Tyler Shough. If you disagree with Scott on Shedeur Sanders, let us know in the chat here.
Please.
Yeah, please. Noted Shedeur Sanders hater Scott Barrett over here. I'll say Brett Whitefield and I were much higher on Shedeur Sanders coming into the NFL draft than Dillon
Dion
Gabriel.
Bucks.
That's right. Let's talk about Tyler Shough, though. Tyler Shough is producing in a major way. From a dynasty point of view, I had this conversation with Rich Haribar on Dynasty Life. I also went on the Undrafted with Jax Falcone over on the Undraftables channel, talking a little Dynasty there. And Tyler Shough is like found money for Dynasty managers because, Scott, I think he's going to survive this thing. It looked like the ultimate bridge quarterback where this guy was just going to kind of maybe get him through the year, and then they draft somebody this year in the NFL draft. Well, this entire draft class that we liked in the preseason, a lot of these names have sort of fallen off the radar. Cade Klubnik, Nussmeier from LSU, Drew Allar. None of these guys are going to be a factor in the first round of the NFL draft. Fernando Mendoza is the one, and then you've got Dante Moore, and you've got Ty Simpson, and both those guys might go back to school and make like $12 million. So you might have a one quarterback first round if these guys all go back to school. And then on the flip side, Tyler Shough has looked really effective in a Kellen Moore offense. Had 2 rushing touchdowns this week. He ran a 4.63 40 at the NFL Combine. He's got some wheels. Everything sort of looks good for the rest of the season. You bring up that huge matchup against Tennessee. What's your thoughts on Tyler Shough here as a fantasy football asset? I mean, forget Superflex here. He might be on the streaming radar in single QB for a couple of these matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I've been encouraged. He's been steadily improving. He's finished as a top 12 quarterback in 3 of his last 4 games, although it's a little misleading because he kind of just barely did that. Sneaky Konami code upside. Remember his 40-yard dash at his pro day or the combine was a lot better than anyone was expecting. He's had 6+ carries in 3 straight games. leads the position in red zone carries with 6, 4 of those designed. And then he also had 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns outside of the 20 last week, 55 rushing yards. Taysom Hill not really involved at all. So like that seems to be a real role for him. I think the best thing for him is he has that cushy week 17 matchup. So if you have, a QB1 you're not feeling great about, or you don't like their week 17 matchup, this is, a player who might be worth stashing. You have, Jaden Daniels went down, Justin Herbert dealing with a hand injury, Baker Mayfield's hurt. So if you have one of those quarterbacks as your QB2, I think, it might feel gross to do, but might be worthwhile to swap them out with Shough for that cushy week 17 matchup.
Yeah, I know that I have a Daniel Jones team, a single QB Daniel Jones team, where I am putting in a big bid for Tyler Shough. We're going to see what happens there. I'm intrigued. I always believe in a Kellen Moore offense. With Kellen Moore, we get the tempo. I know Graham Barfield's also a big fan of what Kellen Moore can do. Just sort of positive vibes. Big win this past week against Tampa Bay. They also had that win against Carolina a couple weeks ago. This team's sort of playing inspired, and Tyler Shough, I think, could give us some sneaky production. So, listen to Scott on this one. You get that one big matchup, and if you're streaming quarterbacks, you might not have a better streaming opportunity than that one. Ryan Flournoy. Very interesting player here, and could be in a huge spot as a fill-in if CeeDee Lamb misses this week with a concussion. Now, CeeDee Lamb gets an extra few days here. The Thursday game is significant. Gives him a little bit more time to clear the protocol. But still, Ryan Flournoy was incredibly impressive in terms of his production against Detroit. Can he do it again this week?
Yeah, I mean, if Lamb is out, if Lamb plays, he's not viable. But if Lamb is out, last 3 games Lamb missed or left early, has a team high 24% target share, topped 110 yards in 2 of those 3 games. So, seems to be a clear valuable role. Freak athlete, small school guy, sort of big slot. I think he's looked good. I think there's some juice to his game. So yeah, if Lamb sits out this week, and I think Lamb probably plays, like I want to be aggressive on Flournoy. I might have him as a mid-range wide receiver 3. So yeah, if you're desperate for a spot start, you could pick him up and hope for the best with, Lamb potentially sitting out.
Yeah. Flournoy is really interesting. Shout out to Joe Dolan on this little bit of advice. Flournoy, you can pick up in dynasty leagues and sort of hold on to him just in case there's some sort of George Pickens divorce in Dallas this offseason.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's a really athletic player. Southeast Missouri State, but he was a Senior Bowl participant. So Flournoy has flashed a few times this season. Looks like Dallas has sort of a long-term ad there. And certainly next year he'll be ideally the wide receiver 3 behind Pickens and Lamb, with sort of a gut shot straight draw that you potentially get him as a replacement. Probably won't happen, but worth picking up for cheap. And I agree with you. This week, if CeeDee Lamb misses, I'd have him sort of as a high-end wide receiver 3. This offense is just so easy to trust. Dak Prescott also has shown you he's willing to hyper-target Flournoy at times this year. So interesting one there. Talk about Jaylen Waddle. Everything's sort of coming together for Waddle in these fantasy playoffs. Your expectations for him, do you think this could end up being a potential situation where Waddle gives you like top 10 wide receiver production the rest of the way?
Yeah, I think that's in the realm of possibilities. I wrote it up that way, and Ryan was like, "Hey, I thought that was one of your best takes. Really good call." He's cleared a 20% target share in 8 of his last 9 games since week 5. He ranks 5th in yards per route run. He ranks top 10 in first read target share. The issue is he's running about 20 fewer routes per game than Trey McBride, nearly half as many targets per game as Jamar Chase. And why is that? It's because Miami, basically since Tyreek went down, is the most run-heavy offense in football by pass rate over expectation. They're also a little bit slower pace, which typically comes with that run-heavy approach. And so if there's they've had positive game script, a lot better than expected, against some really soft run defenses. So if that flips, Waddle can benefit. If it's more of a pass heavy game script, or it's better matchups against tougher opponents. And you see that in the strength of schedule. The Steelers week 15, Buccaneers week 17, both pass funnels. The Bengals week 16, they're bottom 3 against the pass and the run. But, Joe Burrow can always force a shootout. And so it's just massive potential for Waddle should Miami be average in pass rate over expectation instead of dead last. And given these matchups, I think we could see that. And he's a fringe wide receiver 1 for me this week. And if he blows up, that's a really good tell for what he could do over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, really consolidated offense and a team that's really cares. The Dolphins have won 4 games in a row, improved their record to 6-7. So Jaylen Waddle, everything's sort of looking good for Waddle to give you a very, very strong production profile in the course of the fantasy football playoffs. One player that I know you guys wrote about in the Everything Report was George Kittle. You're extremely bullish on Kittle for the rest of the way. You said George Kittle should be viewed as sort of a wide receiver 2 playing the tight end position, and you've got to like the way that the schedule is lining up, not only for Kittle, but maybe for a secondary pass-catching weapon in San Francisco as well.
Yeah, well, he's just been, it's a small sample size this year, but he's been the clear number 1 with Brock Purdy. He was the number 2 with Mac Jones. You look at his numbers over his last 15 full games with Brock Purdy, basically putting up low-end wide receiver 1 numbers, 16.9 fantasy points per game. And if you exclude 3 bad weather games, which isn't, random or me being heavy-handed, this is like in DFS, I'm like, this isn't the week to play Purdy. This isn't the week to play Kittle. Purdy since college has always struggled with, to look up his hand size, but he's always struggled outdoors and in bad weather spots. So if you just exclude 3 games, it was like really bad winds, really bad rain, really bad snow, where both quarterbacks struggled. Kittle jumps to 19.2 fantasy points per game, which is like mid wide receiver 1 numbers, 14.5 fantasy points in 11 of 12. I really just wanted to use that stat that I've had in the back of my head for a while. But yeah, I'm a Kittle truther. And I think that's really Purdy's guy. And yeah, top 3 fantasy tight end moving forward. I think there's a really good chance he pushes up, fringe wide receiver 1 production down the stretch.
Yeah, and highly recommend, if you missed it, the podcast that we recorded on School of Scott last week with Pat Kyren. We all picked a sort of a league winner, sort of under the radar league winner. Scott, you continue to pound the table for George Kittle. I know Pat was very, very bullish on him as well at the tight end position. The final player we're going to talk about to end the show, we've got to check in on our guy, Michael Wilson. This is insane. The third game with Michael Wilson having 15 or more targets. The only other player in the NFL to have 15 plus targets in 3 games played is Jamar Chase. And there's only 2 players that have had 2 games like that, and that's Drake London and Puka Nacua. Let's take like a bird's eye view here. Should we be viewing this as the big Michael Wilson year 3 breakout? Or is this just like a perfect storm of usage and this is all going to fade away at some point? I tend to have an optimistic take on him, like a little long-term trajectory. Wilson looks like a player that's a long-term starter in the NFL here. Targets are earned, and he's doing it at an exceedingly high rate. Sort of your bird's eye view of this situation, and then your expectations for him moving forward this season.
Yeah, this is tough. There's just a wide range of outcomes here. So it kind of makes, pinpointing an answer very difficult. And it's, I love the tweet from Jamie Eisenberg. Michael Wilson is Marvin Harrison Sr. whenever Marvin Harrison Jr. is out, where he has more production in those 3 games by every stat than in his other 10 games with Marvin Harrison Jr. this year combined. He did nothing last year either with Marvin Harrison Jr. on the field. And so, yeah, you have to wonder, well, what would Marv be doing if Michael Wilson were out? Of course, this is so extreme where he's averaging 150 yards per game, 30 plus fantasy points per game in this 3-game stretch. I want to be bullish. I feel like the Theo take is he's arrived. Like this is rare production. This is awesome. But like, I'm still shook by what happened in week 13 when, Marv came back and, he left late in the third quarter. And by the time he left, Marv had 7 targets. Michael Wilson had 3. It was back to being, this sort of non-factor he was when Marv was healthy. So it definitely could be a perfect storm. It definitely could be just like, hey, we're Arizona succumbing to nepotism, and now it's just too blatantly obvious. It's time to be a meritocracy, and let's feature Michael Wilson as the number one. But like I'm probably going to have Marv ranked ahead of him this week if Marv plays and is fully healthy. It'll be close; they'll be right next to each other, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Or am I being too pessimistic?
I don't know. I think there's many ways to look at this one. Again, the sample size is really, really small, but if you go back historically, how many times have we seen a player have 3 games with 15 plus targets in a season? For me, I'm just going to take an optimistic approach that maybe that was sort of a 1 week blip on the radar. Maybe if we see Harrison Jr. come back this week, it'll be actually Wilson leading the wide receiver room. There's really no way to know. You also have a difficult matchup against the Houston Texans defense. But if Wilson can somehow survive this thing and is trending up, you've got a great matchup in week 16 against Atlanta and an unbelievable matchup in week 17 against the Cincinnati Bengals. And I know you've already talked about that game a bunch of times, but Trey McBride, week 17, Cincinnati Bengals for all the money. That one's looking better and better each and every week. The Bengals might be the worst defense we've ever seen versus opposing tight ends.
Yeah, well, I went back at least, a decade plus, and this is the most ever by a defense. I think it's like 50% worse than the next closest defense this past half decade. So, it's just a dream matchup, and like you have to be shitting your pants if you're, the championship and you're up against Trey McBride in that matchup. That is scary.
100%. Scott, what do you have going on rest of the week?
Shifting to DFS. I got the slate breakdown. I got Outside the Box, the Johnny Show Sunday morning. So be sure to check all that stuff out.
Yeah, check out all of our DFS content over at Fantasy Points. Check it out on Fantasy Points YouTube. If you're listening to this show on the podcast feed, do us a favor and subscribe to Fantasy Points YouTube. We continue to grow throughout the year. Definitely check out the 2026 NFL Draft podcast. I just started that up with Brett Whitefield. You can also watch episode number 1 over on Fantasy Points YouTube. We're going to be covering each and everything NFL Draft related that pertains to fantasy football. We're also going to be doing a lot of NFL mock draft content. If you're an NFL Draft fan or a fantasy manager looking for an edge, we've got you covered. Stick with us here at Fantasy Points. We're dropping shows like this all week long. Sigmund Bloom joins me on Dynasty Life later this week. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your fantasy playoffs this season.